So now we will be having our first panel of today, and please let me introduce the guests who will be upstage together with Michael. The first will be Carl. Carl is the co-founder and COO of Enveritas, and he oversees not only the product development, but also the data analysis and the global operations for Enveritas. And before he started working for Enveritas, he worked with TechnoServe, helping the farmers in Africa and Latin America to improve the quality and also adapt sustainable farming processes. And the second speaker in this panel will be Raphael. Raphael, he actually co-founded Algrano, which is an online platform, and he did that because he went to Brazil and he found out about the structural change in coffee trading. So now that we're 6 years later, we actually have more than 100 coffee roasters using this platform to directly trade with hundreds of growers in over 20 countries.
Raphael, Carl, welcome. Cheers.
Thank you. Should I go in the middle?
I have to say I'm very happy that you came back after you left.
We were getting water. It looks like someone already had that covered.
How are you? Good?
Very well. No, it's really wonderful to be here. I think all of us have been really amazed by the hospitality and the generosity of the Probat team, so thank you for having us. It's a great honor.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here with you. I like the... let me open this.
Now I know what you meant with you don't see the people. I got that.
Yeah, this feels like a TV show. Like, we're here together. I really enjoyed listening to Christina's presentation about Colombia, and especially the final part resonated with me very well. The focus on younger generation. Mm-hmm. And how important it is in terms of sustainability to make coffee sustainable for the livelihood of producers and farmers, but also to motivate the younger generation to actually work in coffee, because that's a problem, that the average age of producers and farmers is becoming higher and higher, and the kids saw their grandparents struggling, their parents struggling, so they don't want to work in coffee. So it'd be great if one of the goals of sustainability that we could achieve is to motivate the younger generation to see working in coffee as a dream. So if we speak about younger generations, I'm not going to ask you about your first computer as a kid.
Or my age.
Yes, that too. But I'm curious, what did you want to become when you were a kid, when you grow up? It could be a one-word answer.
Yeah, dentist.
Or you could elaborate. Dentist. Yeah. Okay.
It did not happen.
Did not happen.
No. I was always very interested in geography.
Okay.
And so I liked exploring the world, memorizing facts about the world. So I don't know if I ever thought of being a geographer, but certainly finding something that would allow me to travel the world and understand more about different cultures and different ways of doing things. There was actually a point where I was midway through university and was studying computer science, and I was in front of a computer, and I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I actually want to be working with people and doing something which feels tangible and real. And so I actually changed majors, went into agriculture, and would go on to spend a lot of time on farms after that. And it's kind of ironic that now I come back and actually spend a lot of my time in front of a computer. But that was the original kind of aha moment. I want to do something. I think what has kept me really engaged in coffee is the people and that human connection.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I've been hearing from a lot of people is how nice it is to be able to be back, to see people, to do these things in person, because there is a different. It doesn't feel as authentic when you're doing it intermediated through a screen.
Yep. Did you have an aha moment like that, Raphael, when you realized that I really want to work in coffee. I don't want to be a dentist anymore. I want to work in coffee.
Yeah, there was a moment. So I did a PhD and I was an energy trader after that. And I had a friend who went into coffee trading. He worked for a large coffee trader in Geneva, and basically was based in Brazil. And he called me and he said, "When are your next holidays?" And I went, "Yeah, I'm free to take holidays whenever. So you need to come 3 weeks to Brazil. I need to show you something."
Yeah.
And that's these 3 weeks, they changed my entire life. So 6 months later, I quit the job. We founded the company. And thanks, Daniela, for the nice introduction. But thanks God, it's not just 100 roasters after 7 years. That's largely 10 times more now. Yeah. So that use our system, and that's for me, the aha moment was the moment when I realized that, and I think to relate what we heard before, was when I saw that young generation of growers, they have a smartphone. They have access through 3G to talk to us here now. We could have a producer on the screen talking to us. And I think that's the structural change we see, because that means, and it's, there's a lot of fancy technologies out there, but that's actually the technology that changed the game, in my opinion, that allows a lot to do a lot that, by design, as we call our panel today, right? To give you an example about that young generation, I had a driver here and from Probat. He's called Andre. He did his apprenticeship at Probat, and he worked in the assembly, on the electrical, on the steering. And I asked him what he likes about Probat, and he said, I got to see where all those roasters are going to. We deliver roasters to this country and that country. And he was so proud about, he's doing one part, right? And that's exactly the same with the coffee growers. They're doing one part, roasters are doing another, baristas another part, traders another part, etc. But we need to give back that pride. And then the young generations, and to just tell you the story to the end, Andre's father worked already at Probat. So, he's proud to be here. There was not a decision for him whether he should go to another company or not. Now he comes to Probat and works here and is proud to see the final product and who it reaches. And that's that sensation we need to create in the coffee fields again, that they're proud to produce coffee.
Bringing back the pride, that's very well put. And I think Probat is doing on Friday or Saturday, the open day, when they invite the whole community from the city, the families of all the employees to come to the facilities to see the new production line. And that plays very well the pride narrative. Like they can show their friends, their families, and that's very good. When you started Algrano and Enveritas, what was the problem you wanted to solve? And did that problem and the way you're solving it change over the years since the inception and today?
Can I go first?
Can I go? Yeah. For us, being economist, for us, it was always the information asymmetry we wanted to change. So we realized that information flows only in one direction. You have to think of, so as a trader, I buy a coffee, I sell a coffee to a roaster buys and sells a coffee to a retailer, and the retailer buys and sells the coffee to the consumer. And there's a lot of information that is lost on the way. That's one problem, but the other problem is that no information is flowing back. So if you think about all the sustainability initiatives that we are having, they're consumer-based, and in German they're even called, if you think about traceability, it's even called Rückverfolgbarkeit. So I accept that there is a huge chain and I'm going to trace it back, right?
I'm not even trying to repeat that word.
Rückverfolgbarkeit. And I like that it's called that way, because it's, we don't have Vorverfolgbarkeit, or we don't have, we are not thinking about what actually is information that could make that chain more credible, more sustainable, that could flow back. And that's what we wanted to change. So we wanted to build the supply chain from the grower to the roaster, where information flows in both directions. And we, of course, saw the 3G and the smartphones, and it was very clear for us that we do this through an online platform.
Yeah. Okay.
But it changed a lot on the way. I mean, we had the initial idea was that traders will love that, and they will provide the services to ship the coffees and finance the coffees. They did not like it, and we had to ship and and finance and quality assure the coffees on the way on our own. Thanks God we had to, because we realized that there is also a lot of paperwork and inefficiencies that we can digitize and standardize. And today that's actually the biggest data pool we are collecting and we are working on.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing you say how critical 3G and mobile technology was. We're in the same situation. If we had tried to do what we do 10 years earlier, it wouldn't have worked because there wasn't the connectivity. And so you kind of take a base technology like 3G or like mobile phones being able to run applications, and then that enables all sorts of new technology and products that can be built on top of that. And so in our case, I think we also had kind of a similar origin story back in 2016, where we were looking at the amount of money that companies were spending on sustainability and certification, and then looking at what they got in return for that and saying, like, is this really what people want here? Because on the one hand, there are kind of three problems. So the first problem was that this was a cost that was put on the shoulders of farmers. So it was an added cost for them to prove that they met a certain standard and were then able to market their coffee as sustainable. So, okay, why is the farmer paying for this if it's a buyer requirement? The second issue was that the farmers that were able to participate represented a pretty small proportion of all the farmers that were out there. So it worked well if you were a larger farm, if you were more than 5 hectares, if you had access to information, technology, could hire someone to train, and so on. But for the majority of farmers, over 10 million smaller farmers, they were basically locked out. They weren't able to participate in the system. So it had real scaling problems. And then the third issue, and perhaps kind of the most troubling one, was that there was a very strong incentive not to talk about the truth, not to talk about the real issues that were happening. Because if you construct a system where the farmer is paying for the audit, and if they don't pass the audit, they are not able to get market access, what's going to happen? They're going to look for the easiest way, the cheapest way to be able to do that. And having worked on the other side, advising farmers, we could see how important it was to be able to meet the standards of a certification. Yep. And so basically, it was kind of those three problems that we set out to solve and say, okay, what would a better system look like? Number one, it would need to be free for farmers. Number two, it would need to work everywhere that people are growing coffee. And number three, it would need to be really honest about the issues and allow people to understand what's going on and then set their own course for how they're going to improve. And so going back to mobile phones and the important properties there, it wouldn't be possible to talk to tens of thousands of farmers every year and gather information about the state of coffee production on those farms without a technology like that. And so we began by developing surveys and tools that could run on a smartphone, and then building on different data layers from there that allow companies to measure their sustainability footprint and then chart their own course towards becoming more sustainable.
Yep. Yeah, it's incredible to see how the smartphone and 3G laid the foundations for so many innovations that were built on top of it. The name of the panel is Sustainability by Design. What does that mean? Sustainability by design.
So we actually use a similar kind of language when talking about producers. And so if you kind of look at the state of coffee farming right now, you actually have kind of 3 very, very general profiles of farmers. So on the one hand, you have very sophisticated farms that have adopted best practices and are sustainable by design. It represents kind of a deliberate effort to improve the agronomic practices, the social practices, the environmental practices, with a goal of improving sustainability performance. Now, the reality is that kind of represents a pretty small share of overall coffee production. It's not the majority. And then you have another segment which, from the buyer's perspective, might be sustainable because you're not using any chemicals. You're not hiring any labor. It's very kind of low input, but at the same time, it isn't actually contradicting any of the sustainability expectations that the buyers have. And so this is what we call sustainable by default. But it isn't a reflection of a deliberate set of actions to achieve a sustainability standard. And then what you have is kind of in the middle, a group of farmers that are actually trying to make economic improvements. They're trying to invest. They're kind of looking at the trade-off between should we hire workers to do this task or should we use a chemical or a product? And in many cases, it's very much an economic trade-off. And so they are being put in a situation where, in order to do the right thing economically, they might need to use a pesticide that is banned in Europe, or they might need to hire workers and be in a position where they are deciding, do we pay them more, or do we have enough income to support our family? And so these are really, really difficult choices that farmers are put in the position of. And so we need to construct a system where you don't have to trade, make these kind of trade-offs, but everybody is able to talk openly about some of the challenges and move towards a system where the incentives are better aligned to actually do both what farmers want and what the market requires.
Yep. Raphael?
Yeah, for me it's more on a business level or business decision level that I see it. I was very aligned yesterday when I heard Mr. Norquist speaking. He said, sustainability is just part of our decision making. It's part of our business philosophy. And I think today we have thanks to them, because we also have the part technology in these 2 days, right? I think today when we think about digitizing some processes in our facilities, digitizing processes in our buying, etc., we have the possibility to design new processes, to standardize them, and in that moment, I think we should just include that component of sustainability. And then, because my feeling is we often think sustainability is another thing that I have to do on my daily agenda, and it takes me effort and it's challenging. But no, it's as we just heard before, it's simple. And when we design something new, let's just think about how it can have an impact on the others we are working with, on our partners, on the environment, on our employees, etc. And then we are on the right track. And I think, just talking for myself, when we founded Algrano, we really thought about how should trading look like in the future, and we designed a new way of sourcing, and that new way of sourcing has a big impact on coffee farmers' life, and that's by design.
Yep,
by design.
Yeah, I mean, just like building on that, I think that we've had a view for a long time where sustainability requires added effort. It's like the harder choice to make, and that thinking is not going to work. It needs to be, you need to show a better way that becomes the default way of doing things, because it's easier, because it's better, and of course, because it reduces the externalities and has a positive impact.
I like the point you've made about the importance of being open and honest about challenges, and also the standardization. We also, when I run my small business, I oftentimes feel that, I have this very unique problem that I'm facing, and I'm keeping it for myself, and then I tell someone about it and realize, you're dealing with the same problem. And you're dealing with the same problem. So what if we could come up with a solution that would help to solve it for all of us? So this kind of open way of communication is very, very important. You mentioned this state of farming, the state of coffee farming. Are there any industries you look up to where the supply chain is more sustainable, where they resolve some of these structural challenges that you see? Could be, or if you take, for example, I don't know, cotton, textile, very controversial supply chain. Sugar, even more. Cocoa. Would you elaborate on these comparisons?
Yeah, but I realize, I'm young in the coffee industry. Many people were opening their speeches with 20 years in coffee and longer. I'm 7 years in the industry, and I'm impressed how self-critical we are. Yeah, that's. Before in energy trading, you can think of we were trading gas and oil, and we are the ones causing most of the CO2 emissions. But that's not a topic, right? And I think the coffee industry is very, very self-critical. And I'm very happy about this, because this opens up innovation, and this opens up new ways of going. I think what impresses me most is, and just think about what you're eating every day. bread, meat, milk, whatever, I've never seen as many labels, as many storytelling, as many as in coffee. And I think that's I think rather we should be prouder and maybe also louder towards other industries.
And louder. Good.
Towards other industries, and sometimes the self-criticism helps us to get better, but then also take a step back and say, hey, this is also what we have achieved, and also show it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and I think that we've had this kind of long-standing expectation that the pull on sustainability needs to come from the consumer, right? That if only consumers would say, I care about these things, then the roasters would be able to say, okay, well, we will pay more for it and we can pass it on to the consumer. And then the trade would say, well, if that's what the roaster wants, then we'll be able to supply it. And I think, just think about what James was saying yesterday, right? I think we're misleading ourselves, and we have 20 years to prove out that actually what most consumers care about is the emotional connection that they have with coffee. And so we have not seen much evidence that if you just teach consumers or ask consumers to expect more, that they are going to be willing to pay more for it, and that creates a direct market incentive to do it. I think that another problem that we face in coffee is that oftentimes we do things because that is what everybody else is doing, and not necessarily because it is the best way to approach a problem. So also thinking about what Stephen was saying yesterday, why is it that we need to take 127 flights a year in order to be a roaster? Like, where did that assumption came from? And it comes from what other people are doing, right? And so how do we actually step back and say, okay, can we coordinate better? Can we actually address some of these problems in a way which is going to be not only better for the industry, but also allow us to achieve our goals more directly? And so I think that coffee is looked at by other industries as having figured out a lot of these things. In my own case, I've only worked in coffee, so I don't have firsthand experience of how others do it. But I think that we, kind of looking at where coffee is, I think it might have lost that ability to be a first mover that other industries would say, let's try and do what coffee is doing. I think there was that expectation. I think right now it's probably an important time to pause and say, what are other industries doing? What are other sectors doing? And are there some lessons that we can learn and take into coffee? I was having a chat last night with another speaker here about the cotton industry, right? And one of the things which is very impressive about what they've been able to do is actually design their own standards, fund their own programs, really come up with a strong research and support agenda, which is driven by farmers, and they're able to galvanize the financial support to do those things. And they hold themselves very much accountable to basically delivering on an agenda that has been set by the producers. And so in the case of coffee, we don't really have that kind of a coordination mechanism, right? Because there's very little accountability that exists to ensure that the agenda that farmers care about is actually being delivered upon.
Can I jump in here?
Sure.
What I really like what you just said is we believe that the sustainability needs to come from the consumer. I see rarely sustainability programs that ask producers, what is it, right? And that you need, and how, and what would you suggest? And that's exactly about that openness you mentioned before, right? Because how many roasters have thought about when they launch a new product or something like that? How do I launch it? How do I position it in the market, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? How many of those roasters have called the producers, the mills, the exporters, and asked how would you do it? You produced the part of that product, right? And I think that's this. We forget that there is partners, mostly at the origin, that are highly sophisticated, highly educated, smart people. That have traveled around the globe as well, and that understand very well how to market their product, and we should and how to build sustainable businesses, and we should also include them in the discussion. But that's not answering your question, but it's just a thought I have.
Yeah. If you would have a magic wand, and you'd be able to rethink the whole supply chain of coffee, instead of doing some incremental changes, but completely build it from scratch next Monday, how would that supply chain look like?
Definitely want to hear your answer first.
I mean, part of it we were able to do. So part of it where we said we want to have only service providers in between. So we don't want to have ownership or have trading margins, etc. We want to have services in a chain, because services that allows transparency. So everybody has to be very clear which service he or she provides and how much he or she gets paid. That was for us very important. That was the first step. I think the next step that I would love to see is I still see we digitized a lot from production to roaster. But we do not yet see that digitization. That's kind of interesting from roaster to consumers. I still realize that roasters are thinking in packaging. They're thinking in stickers. They put in packaging. That's the information I get on there. And they're not thinking yet in experiences. So we don't see product experiences happening. And that can be, multimedia experiences. That can be the fun part that James mentioned. That can be just like, I don't see this happen yet. And if I had a wish, I would like to see this happening, because then I believe the consumer and the producers can be linked also. And that would be my wish. Yeah.
Okay.
I think in my case, one of the probably fundamental problems that the coffee industry faces is that the coffee trees basically selected the farmers. It wasn't as if the farmers selected the trees. And literally what I mean by that is, in many parts of the world, the trees are actually older than the people that are producing coffee and harvesting it. And so what that means is that a lot of people didn't actually opt in and make a choice at the beginning to plant coffee. They were given it through inheritance, or because that was the opportunity, that was the only opportunity at the time that was available. And obviously in many countries, coffee has a strong colonial history, right? And so the fact that you have a population of people that are growing coffee and looking after coffee, but in most cases that was never a conscious choice to opt in and choose the variety and choose the optimal practices for that area, means that we have a lot of systems and kind of even the way that the supply chain is structured has been born out of the necessity, as opposed to let's start from a blank canvas and figure out what is the best system for growing coffee in this environment and what people want to sign up for that, right? Because one of the things that we look at, we do this every year, we ask farmers a question. It's like a sentiment question, Are you optimistic about the future? Do you think your children will want to grow coffee? And we tend to see pretty high responses. About 90% say yes. We expect our children to take over, right? But what's not really being captured there is what are the other opportunities that farmers are considering, and does this represent really the choice that they deeply want to make? Do they? And another challenge is that leaving coffee is expensive. It's difficult for farmers to uproot their trees, right, and to plant something else. So there's kind of pretty powerful inertia keeping the population of people that are growing coffee in place. And so if I had a magic wand, I would try and remove a bit of that stickiness, make it easier for some to enter, easier for others to move, and really make sure that the population who is engaged in coffee farming is one that is really motivated and wants to do that.
It always makes me so angry when I talk to someone outside of coffee, and we talk about specialty coffee, and they say, "Oh, delicious coffee. That's just like delicious wine." So like coffee producing is the same as wine producing, right? And you need to explain that, God, like wine producers in France live in castles. Like it's a completely different supply chain that works completely differently. I'm wondering what role.
Do you think the solution is to build castles for the producer?
Well, I wouldn't start there, but it would be great if we can get there at some point. I wonder what role data plays in all this. work in coffee, but you also work in technology with your companies. So I'm wondering, we spoke yesterday about the role of smart data and how important it is to not just collect data, but also to be able to draw relevant conclusions out of that data and make informed decisions. So I'm wondering what role data plays in the supply chain, and how can we, as an industry, can get better at collecting data and drawing the conclusions out of them.
Yeah, so I would actually, when listening to the conversation yesterday, I'd actually say that, data is not smart. Data is dumb, right? Data has no information. What you need is actual humans asking smart questions and coming up with good answers and ways of communicating the insights from that data. Don't quote me on this, but I think there's a statistic that the amount of data that was created just in the last 12 months is probably more than was created in the years from 1900 to 2000, right? So there's a tremendous amount of data that is being captured, and really the hard work is figuring out how do you normalize that data and extract insights that are useful for people. In our situation, we spend about an hour talking with we talk with about 50,000 farmers every year, and we spend about an hour with each farmer. So we have a tremendous amount of information. It's a very, very rich data set, and we're only able to derive insights from a very, very small proportion of that. And then the amount that we're able to communicate back to our partners and to growers is a subset of that. So it's a very small amount that is able to actually influence decisions and people are able to act on. And even then, people struggle to say, okay, based on this, what should we do? So I think a lot more of it's very much a human problem. How do we figure out what are the right questions to ask and what are the actions that we want to take based on the answers to those questions? And that should really drive how we use the data and make sure that we have the right data. Because the cost of collection and the cost of using other sources is only going to fall. It's going to become easier and easier to get more data. But that presents a very different problem, which is, well, what do we actually want to do with this? And how are we going to act on it? And what is the change that we want to make?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly the point what you mentioned. I think if you digitize processes, you will automatically collect data, and by design, and that's actually what we realized. So when I mentioned before, so Algrano is this hybrid, right? With this online platform where trades happen, and then there is an offline execution of contracts that we also organize, shipping and quality assurance, etc. But we always collected the data on it. And last year, we realized that this data is very, very powerful performance indicators actually for producers. So we know who is on time, we know whether pre-assessed samples were approved or not, and we see patterns there. We can give this data back to producers to help them assess the performance. But we also figured out that we have data on roasters. So we know how quick they reply when they receive a sample, etc., etc. And we started to build a product. It's called My Customers. It's actually a CRM, a customer relationship management tool for producers.
That's the product you won the award.
Yeah, that's the product we won the award this year, exactly, from the Specialty Coffee Association. And it's a data product we have never thought of at the beginning, right? But it's so powerful. We had, the award was nice, but we had the night before, we had 50 producers from 18 countries teaching each other how to use this feature to increase their performance in the market. And I think that's amazing. You see data at work. You see how it's used and done. And that's what I'm thinking. Don't think about too much where you want to go. Once you have the data, once you collect it, and if you do it, and my advice would be to do it, digital and not pull data, not do. Just collect it on the way. Just make that the data comes to you, right? And that you can do through digitizing processes. And then you will figure out new products, actually, that maybe you're even going to sell, right? And your consumers, your customers, your employees will learn from.
Yeah, I was thinking about this one during Anne's talk yesterday about the importance of standardization and having protocols that are widely accepted. So in coffee, in the trade, one of the protocols or the conventions is having an ICO number, right? And so when we were starting out, we assumed that ICO numbers would actually be a useful tool in figuring out where coffee came from. And so like the way an ICO number is constructed is you have an origin code, you have an exporter code, and then you have a lot code. But what we quickly learned is that actually the way that that is being interpreted is unique to every single country. And many contracts actually don't do a good job of keeping the ICO number. And so we had to build a system where we can work with a roaster and take their book of coffee purchases and figure out where all of that came from. And when we learned that the ICO code or reference was not a useful way of tracing where the coffee came from, we had to basically do our own data analysis to identify the patterns and come up with our own system. Just an example where it would be incredibly helpful if there was a functioning system of origin, exporter, port, lot number, and that was an open data set that anybody could look at just to understand where did this coffee come from. But right now, that doesn't exist, and I think it holds a lot of innovation back.
I have a question for you that concerns a term. Yes. There are a few. That concerns a term that's often being thrown around on stages when we talk about digitalization or sustainability. And it's a one-word question.
I think I know what this is going to be.
Yeah, I have a fear.
Blockchain, question mark.
Yeah, we were, when we started 7 years ago. We had to fund ourselves. We were pitching Algrano to potential investors, and I've heard that question so many. So is this blockchain? And I think blockchain was really, really successful in raising funds and money because it was sexy, right? I think what we forget is that the blockchain is a medium to store data, and it's just the what. So it's just the how. So how do I do something? But it's not the why. It's not giving me. I should think about first why I'm doing something, where I want to go, and then how I go there. And for us, blockchain has never been the right answer to the how, because we still think it has inefficiencies and etc. And that the data, how we store it, because it's a data storage, is safe and is trusted by the roasters and producers that are using Algrano. So it has never been a topic for us.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think that there's, at its heart, what blockchain enables is coordination, like permissionless coordination. And so that is actually very helpful. It can be very helpful for things like finance and transfers of value and storage of value. But thinking that it is purely a financial solution is probably a kind of miscategorization of what the what the technology is designed to do. And so there's certainly going to be use cases, I believe, where having an open, permissionless database is going to be very useful for certain applications. Now, is that useful for every application? Do you want to design something just to take advantage of the fact that this is a buzzword and there's funding for it? Absolutely not, right? And so, I think a lot of the experiments that have been done in coffee, trying to bolt on blockchain, you don't hear much about them these days, so I'm guessing they haven't panned out that well. 5-10 years from now, I have a feeling it will play a role, but probably not in the ways that we expect right now.
Yeah, and in so many cases, the executions of implementing blockchain in different companies' visions, it's contradictory to the whole idea of decentralization. Like, right. You can use decentralized ideology of blockchain, but if the data is centralized in your company and you are the decision maker and you are the bottleneck in the information flow, it's not decentralized. So right. I would love to end on a practical note. How should, following up on some of the points made during yesterday's talks, that at the end of the day, it's about what's in the cup, how it tastes, how it makes the end consumer feel. How should sustainability affect the end product?
I want to actually kind of go back to what James was saying, because I think that was pretty powerful there. And I think what has happened now is that there's really an expectation that companies are acting responsibly. right? And that the supply chain is doing its job. And so I think that it's more that customers are going to be disappointed and surprised if they are told your coffee has real problems with it. And so I think that they are still going to be drawn to drinking coffee based on the emotional connection, the flavor, the experience, all of those intangibles, right? And I think that has really shifted the burden of people that are working on sustainability to make this something that is business, that becomes part of the way of doing business, right? It is not a special initiative. It is not simply an add-on. It is something that is internalized by every company, and they find out how to make this the default option. And then consumers will come to expect that. And if you don't have an answer to these questions, you will not be able to sell. It doesn't give you an advantage, but if you don't have it, it gives you a pretty significant disadvantage. And I think that is where things need to head. There are signs that it's going there. And I think that consumers are right to expect, okay, the time for not knowing what is going on, that was 10 years ago, that was 20 years ago. Now it's just a basic expectation.
Yeah, I agree with. I would also link to James' keynote. I think if we can give the consumer a product that everybody in the chain is proud of, had fun to produce it, and we can pack that in an experience. And I'm thinking of brewing my coffee in the morning and listening to the favorite song of the producer, or I think I have experience with my coffee and I enjoy it, and I know that the guy who picked that song and this is his favorite song, he also enjoys that I enjoy, and we enjoy it together. I think that would that's the goal I would love to see where we are working together.
To put the benchmark higher, to make sustainability the standard. Sustainability by default.
I want to say one more thing. I see the light blinking. I know we're out of time. But I think it's also one of the things that that's really important, right? And going back to the idea of there being more honesty and the willingness to have open conversations, is that unfortunately a lot of the ways that sustainability has been viewed is that there is zero tolerance for any imperfection. And anybody who works in manufacturing, anybody who works in the physical world knows that that's an impossible ideal to set.
And Cooper said it very well yesterday. Yeah.
Exactly. So there needs to be tolerance, and there needs to be space to talk about what is going on. And I'm actually quite concerned about policies, even ones in Europe, which say zero tolerance. If this is found, then the answer is to not buy the product and to stop. Now, I think that creates enormous pressure to do something. But I think it also goes back to putting the burden really on the farmer to solve these problems, and that's an unfair expectation. So, call it consumers or civil society or governments, they need to create some space for there to be conversation and innovation, and they can't just say, okay, like now, starting tomorrow, we will not accept anything that has a slight imperfection in it.
Well, here's to imperfections. Here. Guys, thank you very much. I would love to love to continue the conversation. I think we will during the coffee break afterwards. If anyone has any questions, I would love to encourage you to reach out to Carl and Raphael during the coffee break, during the lunch break, and just continue talking. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks
it's
for
been a
listening.
pleasure
Thank you.
being here with you.